Welcome to our How conversation on moral leadership. We are so thrilled to have with us today retired now General David Goldfein.
Thanks,
How are
Dana.
you doing?
Great to be here. I'm doing great. I had no idea that retired life could be so much fun.
So on your journey, I heard that you and your wife, Dawn, who you've been married to since you graduated from the Air Force Academy in 1983, your high school sweetheart, decided to take a road trip in a camper van from DC to Texas. How did that go?
You know, we decided that, like many, if we can't stay in hotels because of COVID, we should just pull one behind us. So we got the chance to just sort of re-see America a little bit from a different perspective, and I got to tell you, it was just so much fun. We met people in the campgrounds. We got a chance to get out and see America a little bit, and quite frankly, we got a chance to unwind, you know. And nothing better than waking up whenever you feel like waking up. And some of our best days were, quite frankly, just in the campground, just relaxing, reading, spending time with each other. We logged 45 days together with no interruption, and it was quite an experience.
Oh, fantastic. Well, after 37 years of service, and since you married right after graduation, I'm guessing 37 years of marriage as well. That's time that you have earned and deserve. I know you talk about your time of service as a sacred duty, and you had incredible responsibilities when you retired, leading our United States Air Force with almost 700,000 of our team members, active duty, reserve, guard, and our civilian members. A huge responsibility. You've led at every level, retiring as a Joint Chief, and also being shot down, rescued, and being responsible for missions that rescued others. I want to start with asking you a question that you love to ask airmen. And I know you said this when you went to the Air Force Academy, that you like to go up and ask airmen, tell me your story. What led you to service? And so I'd like you to share some of your story. What led you into service?
Yeah, I will. But Dana, I'm gonna start off by just reminding anybody here that you served as well. And not only were we classmates, but we were squadron mates, and you were the first in our class to make flag general officer to serve as the dean there. And so thank you for your incredible career in service. So my story is somewhat, not really that unique. My father was an Air Force veteran, 33 years, Vietnam veteran, fighter pilot, flew F-4s. My older brother went to the Air Force Academy class of 78 and graduated as the cadet wing commander there. And so it just sort of seemed to be the natural progression for the Goldfein boys to go into the Air Force and to the Air Force Academy. I will tell you, I had two very unique experiences at the Academy that we can talk about. The first 2 years, which were quite a bit of a struggle, and the last 2 years that were quite a blessing.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, because you participated in a program called Stop Out, which was to take a year off between your first 2 years and your second 2 years. And at the Howe Institute for Society, Dov Seidman, our CEO and founder, talks about when you hit pause on a machine, it turns off. But when you hit pause on a human, it's actually begins or starts. And you did that. You took a full year off, and I'd like for you to share with us a little bit about why and what you learned in that pause for your year off.
Well, you may remember, Dana, I was struggling a bit at the Academy academically. I think I was hovering at a 1.9 to 2.0 GPA, and I was just not doing that well as a cadet. And I think the Academy leadership, we sort of made a mutual decision that I could probably use a year to get my act together, quite frankly. So at the time, you may remember, my passion was music at the time, and my childhood heroes growing up were folks like Harry Chapin, James Taylor, uh, sort of that genre. And I got a job as a roadie for Harry Chapin. So this is an opportunity to go out and really pursue that other passion. And my only way of getting to him in New England was to get on a 10-speed bicycle and ride from my girlfriend, now wife's house in San Antonio, ride a 10-speed bicycle across the country to join up. And that was the tragic summer of 1980 when he had his car accident and was killed. And so I found myself on the road in the middle of America with no plan. So I continued to ride for the remainder of that year, just me, and I found a little dog on the way and who traveled with me. And what we did was discovered America. And I discovered America and really had a chance to reflect and think about this business of serving and defending the many people I met along the way. So many of them who took me in to their homes, who opened and embraced this, long-haired kid with a beard, on a bicycle with a puppy, or a dog. And I came to the conclusion that America is worth defending. And so when I made that phone call I remember it was in Bowling Green, Kentucky, on a cold, rainy night, I called back and told them I was coming back. And since that day, I've never looked back. And it's really helped me to define why we serve. It's to protect this great experiment called democracy, and the many people that I met, just incredible Americans I met along the way who took the time to take me in.
It's a beautiful story, and we're so glad that you did. And one of your quotes where you talk about leadership and service, you say leadership is a gift from those that you serve. I wonder if you might not talk about that, what you mean by that of, leadership for those or from those that you serve.
We often, I think, as leaders grow into these positions of responsibility, and we start going off the tarmac when we start believing that that we're entitled to any particular things as leaders, or that the folks around us that we're privileged to serve are honoring the person over the position. At the position of chief or a higher level, I had a personal security team. And I would travel to and from work and around town, and especially when I traveled, I would have a security team, a hard car, normally a chase vehicle, cars in front, cars in back. And on occasion, in order to make a meeting or whatever, they have the authority to turn lights and sirens, and we can, move our way through traffic. I never liked doing that. And especially when I was on the road and I had a training team that didn't really know me and they would try that, I would ask them, quietly to turn off the siren, turn off the lights. I said, here's what you have to understand. Everyone you're shoving to the side is my boss. I actually work for them. And I owe it to them to be respectful, as I make my way to whatever this meeting that we're going to. Is not so important to be disrespectful to those I'm privileged to serve, which are the American people that we're shoving to the side here, as we go forward. So it's a privilege, and I think leaders have to understand that.
Let's transition into talking about decision-making as a moral leader, if we can, because you've had to make such incredibly difficult decisions. They probably get more difficult as you advance in position of authority and rank. And sometimes the options aren't optimal, but you have to decide. How do you, maybe you'd share an example of how you made a really challenging decision and what you did to kind of keep hope and faith in the hearts and minds of airmen to support the mission.
Yeah, thanks, Dana. What I would tell folks as well, especially young commanders, the higher you go in rank and responsibility, the harder the decisions are, and they should be. And if you are, as a senior leader, are spending your time on easy decisions, you're actually wasting your time, and you're probably doing somebody else's job, and they don't really need your help. So everything that comes into the office of the Chief of Staff of the Air Force is hard. It's murky. There are no defined, easy answers. Usually the easy or good options are long gone. And so sometimes you're faced in finding what's the least bad, of the options that have been presented to you. Every move you make as a leader causes a equal and opposite reaction in the opposite direction, which means that some number of people are not going to like the direction you take. And so don't take the happy road, take the right road. If you know that some number of people are going to be unhappy, it actually frees you to make the right decision, because no matter how the only way you can get it completely wrong is try to make everyone happy, which never works. So take the right road, not the happy road. To be able to make good, sound decisions, you have to have a diverse team around you that does not look at the world the way you do. Mm. Because we all have blinders on. I've never been the only woman in a room. I've never gone through what you've gone through. I've never had everything I've said scrutinized to a completely different degree like you have. I've not ever had people say things to me they probably thought were funny, but were actually quite degrading, and I had to just suffer through it, which I'm sure you have had happen, throughout your career. That's not been my experience. Every room I walk into has been full of me, and so if I have a team that I've built around me that has my life experiences, my background, then I'm not going to see around the corners that I need to see and understand the issue from such a diverse perspective.
You told a story in one of your meetings about the flesh-colored Band-Aid. And I wonder if you might talk a little bit about diversity and inclusion, and maybe advice for some of our listeners of how do you really bring together a diverse and inclusive team and recognize that we have these blinders or blind spots or biases that we bring in.
The story, very quickly, is I had a senior NCO, Chief Master Sergeant, walk into my office when I was a young squadron commander and said, "Hey, sir, this ought to make you mad because it makes a lot of your airmen mad." And he threw this box on my desk of Band-Aids. And so I looked at it and went, "Hey, what are you talking about? I don't get it. What does this have to do with it? Flying operation." And he said, "Well, read the box." I said, "Johnson & Johnson, flesh-colored Band-Aids." I said, "Hey, Chief, what are you talking about?" He said, "Well, I'm going to show you." And he ripped a Band-Aid out, put a pink Band-Aid on his black skin, and it shone like a beacon. He looked at me, he sort of winked, and he said, that ought to make you mad because it makes a lot of your airmen mad. And he walked out. All right, so I share that story because it's a visual, I think, that you can get in your head that I couldn't see it. There's no way. I could have sat there for weeks staring at the thing. There's no way I was blinder, right? What other color would flesh-colored Band-Aids be but pink? So it's what I put on every day, or whenever right? It's what I use. It's what, again, the world sort of just is every time I walk in a room, it's all about, it's just, it's not the same experience. So we have these blinders. So if you start the dialogue with, okay, I have blinders. I need someone to help me see what I cannot see. And diverse teams perform better and come to much better solutions, much more creative solutions. Then the more complex and hard the problem, the more important a diverse team is. So you get the very highest levels of government when you're talking about being a joint chief and you're talking about being a chief of an organization and responsible for the national security of the nation. I can't think of an area where diversity and diverse teams are more important. To me, it's a warfighting imperative in the military, and perhaps in business, it's also an imperative that we have to have diverse teams to be able to create the solutions that we need to some of our most complex challenges.
Yeah. Of all the characteristics that you would say are important for leaders, specifically moral and ethical leaders, what's one characteristic that you say is kind of the preeminent or most important characteristic?
throughout my time, I would get the question like this, especially I love the ones from young airmen. I mean, my probably one of my funniest moments, great moment was I went down to Lackland Air Force Base, basic training, and they picked a certain, a selection of cadets or trainees because they hadn't earned the title airman yet, and they chose them to sit with me and have lunch. And there was this young woman who was some young lady was sitting across from me, basic, 19 years old, looked at me and she said, "Hey, sir, I got a question." And she pointed this to the stars, and she goes, "How do I get some of those?" And I just chuckled. I said, "Well, being selected from all of your peers to have lunch with the Chief Staff of the Air Force is not a bad start." I said, "But most importantly for you to think about at every level is character being the foundation of any successful leader." In the Air Force terms, what I would tell young commanders, especially and senior NCOs, I said, unless you got an Oscar on your shelf somewhere for just great acting, the airmen in our Air Force are so wicked smart. They are going to see right through a say-do gap. They will see right through you. And so we live in a glass bubble, in a fishbowl, and we ought to welcome that. From the moment you open the door to your home and step out on the landing to the time you close that door, 12, 14, whatever many hours later, you're on. And the higher you go in leadership positions, the loneliness that comes with leadership is not that there are not plenty of people around you. It's that you are more and more responsible for the outcome of the decisions that you make. Mm-hmm. And when you're having those quiet moments, when nobody else is around, and you're thinking through a decision, what you always go back to, what we all always go back to, is that core of our being, which is our character. How do we act when no one's watching? Mm-hmm. How do we handle the little things? The small decisions. And so it's not only the secret to success for that young, basic who wants to become a general officer, but it's the secret for all of us that without character as the foundation, the rest doesn't matter. You quite frankly, you can have success in many things. There was a period of time in our military where we got a little bit out of balance, I think, probably in the middle years of the war against violent extremism. We started valuing competence over character, and we got a bit out of balance. And we had a series of, tragic actions. Abu Ghraib, Sergeant Bales. I mean, we had a series of tragic tragedies that went right to the heart of who we are as a military, representing, this great experiment called democracy. And I think we all in leadership positions worked to right that ship a bit, to make sure that both character and competence are equally valued in leadership. So I'd say that character is the foundation.
And my sense is from your answer, it's not only at every level within the military, across all sectors, and the private sector as well as the military, clearly. I'm wondering if you might talk a little bit about that, linking the military and civilian lenses together with regard to risk. As you pointed out, the risk in some of the work to be done, and the impact of the potential outcomes based on what you do or do not do, having, guided by character. How do you think about risk from a military lens for civilian, but also maybe what we learn from civilians in the military?
Yeah, thanks, Dana. My first few months as chief, I had sit-downs one-on-one with as many CEOs as I could talk to. And I said to them, look, I've never been a CEO. I don't know or have a background in the pressure that you face to present quarterly earnings and deal with your shareholders and stakeholders. I said, I do know that I'm a principal customer, and I'd like your advice on how to be a good customer. And one of the things that many of them said, they said, look, we're going to make risk decisions, and we're going to make calculations, and we're going to make investments based on what we hear you saying. And it's really important that you be clear with us on what it is that you want, where you're going, and why, so we can make important risk decisions in our company to align. And then one of the CEOs said, I'm making way too many static displays, meaning investing corporate money based on what they'd hear the chief say, right? And then have the service turn left when it was going right. And then corporate investment and risk decisions they were making turned out to be bad decisions. So for me, what I tried to do was, from that series of discussions, I sat back and thought, all right, where can I take the service, and how do I maintain consistency with the message so that my business teammates are making smart risk decisions? And I settled on 3 words that sort of hopefully define the tenure: joint warfighting excellence. Anything we did, any movement we made, would improve the Air Force's ability to fight jointly with our joint teammates, allies, and partners, and be more combat capable. And as long as we were making decisions linked to that fundamental strategy, then we would be consistent. And then I could help them with making, clear risk decisions that would actually become profitable for them, which we want, and would benefit the service in terms of making us more combat capable.
Sounds like a win-win exchange that happened there, leading to greater character at a company, organizational level, and a relationship level. Humility just oozes from you. And I think as we talk about the virtue of humility, it's actually service in action, which has been your life journey. Someone quoted you as advancing and enlarging the prospect of peace. And I know in our own conversation with each other that drives you, and developing moral leaders is also something that you're incredibly passionate about.
Developing moral leaders with humility is perhaps as important today as at any time in our history. We are the 800-pound gorilla, right? When I just to give you an example, as Air Component Commander in Central Command, I commanded the 3rd largest air force in the world as a 3-star commander, let alone being the Chief Staff of the Air Force. It would be so easy to walk in and just be the bulldog in the room. But the problem with that approach is that we have as much to learn as we have to offer. And especially when it comes to the cultural understanding of the region, no one can substitute for those who have grown up there that know. And so internationally, it's so important to be humble when you approach problem solvers. When we went into COVID, we built a network of over 120 air chiefs that we built sort of a chat room approach where we could share what we were learning and thinking about. And we learned so much from the Italians, who were sort of the first ones that were having to deal with COVID, right? Great discussions with my Japanese air chief counterpart. So throughout the world, we had this ongoing discussion about how to contribute as a U.S. military and as air forces to this global pandemic. And that would never have happened if the first shot out the bow would be, hey, let me tell you everything that we're doing and, you know, you need to get in line with us. You know, that's, you know, not only is it disrespectful, but it shuts off learning opportunities. And so I do believe that both individually and collectively, it's time for us to show a bit of humility. You know, I'm a guy you mentioned at the beginning who is alive today because of some young men, because women weren't in special operations at the time. You know, some young men who came, risked everything, got shot at to rescue me from, you know, getting shot down. I owe these guys my life. That makes you a little bit humble, quite frankly, and so I do believe that it is not a sign of weakness to be humble and bring humility to the table. It's actually a sign of strength.
Well, you certainly bring that strength to everything that you do, and you will always be the 21st Chief of Staff of the Air Force, because General Brown is the 22nd, as I was the 19th, but you'll always also be a classmate, a wonderful husband, father, dad, grandfather now, and always an aspiring, because I know you're always learning, moral leader. And I just want to thank you for participating in this How conversation on moral leadership and contributing to our listeners with lots of examples of how you think about moral leadership. And it's very inspiring and compelling. And we wish you all the very best in the next chapter of your journey. And we salute you and we thank you deeply. Thank you, General Dave Goldfein. Dave.
Thanks, Dana. And thanks to you too for your incredible leadership at our Air Force Academy and throughout your career, and now at the Howe Institute, and for taking on this important topic. I'm honored to participate.
Well, it's nice to be doing this work together. So thank you very much, and thank you to our listeners. Onward and upward we go.